My name is Kat Sinclair. I'm a PhD student in cultural studies at University of Sussex, and I work on looking at the political economy of feminized robots. So my work looks at different representations of and embodiments of robots which are considered feminine or feminized in some way, and looks at the economic and material reality of them. Looks at how they intersect with women's experiences in the workplace, with workplace technologies, with domestic labour, etc., etc. Some of that means looking at films, and some of it means looking at Alexa and stuff like that. So I'm really interested in kind of a materialist, ideological look at robotics. But I'm also a poet, so I have a kind of artistic practice which takes place mostly outside of my PhD. They don't tend to intersect very much. When Evelyn contacted me to ask if I wanted to be involved in this project, I kind of jumped at the chance to be involved in something which took my poetic practice and my PhD interests and kind of smashed them together. And it's made me think about my relationship to robotics in a completely different way, because obviously I'm writing about robots at a remove a lot of the time. I'm deliberately distancing myself from them and thinking about them purely in terms of like work, labour, the way in which they're made, the space they take up in the economy and the workplace, how they impact upon human workers. So I'm interested in the physical side of things, but I don't often actually interact with a physical robot. Because it's quite rare to come across one like this. I mean, I interact with Alexa and my mobile phone and things like that, but Cleo is quite different. So to stand in front of Cleo and recognize her as a humanoid body, and not just as something which I write about, or as something which exists quite a long way away, has been quite eye-opening for me. It's really made me rethink how we experience emotion and feeling and care in relation to robotics. And it's a lot more messy and complex than maybe I've been expecting it to be. Because I've stood next to her and I have some kind of respect for her, and it feels very strange. I don't like it, because that's not how I usually think. So to have that foundation and that context already in place, and then to add poetry on top of that, has been really strange. What I did for my poetry performance was I pre-recorded half of a poem and spliced it, so it alternated between me reading and Cleo reading with the preset voice. But all of those noises were coming out of her mouth. So she read the whole poem. Sometimes it was her voice, sometimes it was my voice, but it was always coming out of her body. And that, again, complicated my kind of physical relationship to her, because that was me speaking from her. So it's been a really, really eye-opening experience. It's been really fascinating, and it's given me a lot to chew on. I haven't really come to any conclusions, but it's definitely shaped how I'm thinking about people's relationships to physical humanoid robotics, and how it's a lot more complex than simply they are robots, we are humans, which is something I've thought about intellectually, but again, having that encounter has really solidified that and given me a lot to chew on. And I'm really excited to see where this project goes. I'm hoping that there'll be a robot opera third installment with a different robot again, or maybe Cleo again. And yeah, it would be lovely to continue to be involved in it. It's been incredible to work with such a broad range of people across digital humanities. There's this scene in Ex Machina by Alex Garland where the main robot character, Ava, played by Alicia Vikander, up until this point in the film, she's been, she had kind of like a silicon skin face, but every other part of her is clearly robotic. It's like all silver and exposed wires and things like that. And so that she's having this conversation with Caleb, who's the main male character, I suppose, and they're having this kind of semi-romantic encounter, and she goes to put some clothes on and comes out and says, oh, how do I look, etc. And up until that point, I hadn't considered her to be like naked. I hadn't considered her to be like to not have clothes on. But then when she goes to take off her shirt after she's put the clothes on, then suddenly it seems like she's naked, and that like her robot skin is like not for my eyes. And there's another scene later on where she undoes a panel on the side of her robot skin underneath the clothes, and then underneath that is some more exposed wiring, and she can cut through it. So there's all these layers I find really, really fascinating in this film. And then I came to kind of be introduced to Cleo, and they lifted up her shirt, and I saw this exposed power switch. And it brought that back completely, where I was like, this feels weirdly obscene, like lifting up someone's shirt to press the off switch. I think if she had arrived and not had clothes on, or not, even not had that silicon skin, it wouldn't feel the same. But because they've added, these extra layers have been added to increase kind of her proximity to us, suddenly it feels really strange to remove them, and it feels like you're violating her or something. So there's this knowledge that I have that what's underneath is purely robotic, but when you cover it with something else, suddenly it complicates things, and you don't feel like it's purely robotic, and you think like if you were to kind of lift up her shirt, she would be offended.
It changes up.
Yeah.